You Mountain Dew drinking gamers. It's the Chad Galileo, and today I'm going to be ranking every single League of Legends champion based on how terrifying slash unfortunate it is to have on these champions on your team. So this is completely unscripted. I haven't even really thought about it. I'm just gonna go to every champ and be like, "Oh my god, this is my reaction." So yeah, basically what I mean by terrifying is is this teammate gonna run it down? Are they gonna int? Are they gonna feed their lane? Is it way too hard of a champ and they just shouldn't be playing it? And yeah, stuff like that. So for context, I'm a platinum mid lane Galio main on the NA server. So do with that as you will. Of course, this is gonna be from my perspective. I'm sure some of these champs are amazing in Diamond Plus, and some of them probably suck in bronze. So conversely, if you're better than me, you might be like, "What? This champ is amazing about you, low." Cool, dude. I'm talking about mine. And also conversely, if you're like bronze and you're like, "This champ hard carries me every game," like Master Yi or something, maybe that's true. But for my context and plat, and for my personal experience, which is all this is going to be the tier list. If you can relate to it, maybe drop a like, leave a comment, let me know what you would change differently in the tier list, and yeah, let's just get right into it. So as far as the categories go, kind of self-explanatory, but dodge basically means I want to dodge or I want someone else to dodge. It doesn't necessarily mean I will dodge. Like if I see X champ in the dodge category, it doesn't mean I instantly click X. It just means I really want to dodge. Extremely shook, under dodge. I'm very regretful that this person locked this champ in, but maybe it's playable. Spooky, it's it's kind of maybe. Bit spooky, it's all right, most of the time it's good, but I have reasons for concern. Not scary probably means I like having them on my team. Or they're just consistently good for me. So yeah, without further ado, now we've broken down the categories, so we'll just get right into it. So first off, Aatrox, not scary. Every time I have Aatrox on my team, they do at least something most of the time. So yeah, not really scary. Ari, kind of the same deal. Pretty easy champ to play. Oh, and by the way, if I say a mid laner, obviously I play mid most of the time, so it's not like I have them on my team that often. But if I'm autofilled support or something, these are the mids I'm cool with having. Akali, pretty spooky. She's a strong champ. She's not as hard to play as I think some people say, but I think that a lot of Akali players kind of play for ego. So yeah, it makes it a little spooky. Akshan, I'm gonna say not scary. I was gonna say bit spooky because they also kind of have that whole ego thing with the Akali players, but Akshan has 9 passives on his W and a revive, so I mean he's always kind of useful. Alistar. So unfortunately I like Alistar, but he is a bit spooky. And the reason I say bit spooky is he kind of loses to the enchanter meta that's going on. You don't really see a whole lot of Alistar, but if you see someone lock him in, they're probably a one trick or they just love Ali. Not a bad champ by any means, just kind of loses a lot. Alune. So Alune is not actually a champion. So what I'm going to use is this is going to be our placeholder for the newest champ. So right now, that would be Nyla. Where it came out, Bel'Veth. Whatever the newest champ is, and for some godforsaken reason, Riot doesn't just make them not available for 2 weeks. People always oh, I'm going to first time this champ in rank, guys. I'm definitely not going to run it down and ruin the game. So whoever the newest champ at whatever given patch is a dodge situation for me. Because I just know that this person has never even gotten the practice tool. They haven't played a single normal. They're just locking in a new champ and hoping for the best. So it's usually just an auto loss, but whatever. Amumu, not scary. Disgustingly easy to play. Very useful. Also, as a Galio player, I mean, come on, guys. Amumu R, Galio R, it's disgusting, right? Anivia, yeah, I mean, so if this was the opposite, on the opponent team, terrifying for me. But on my team, not really spooky. Pretty useful champ all the time. Annie, same thing, super easy. Aphelios, pretty shook. Pretty shook. He is not the best ADC, mostly because he's hard to play. And also because he's not that great. So if I see someone lock him in and they don't have 800k master or something, I'm pretty shook. Ashe. Dodge situation. You guys are probably what the fuck? Here's the thing. To me, Ashe, it's just such a useless ADC. And support, there's just better options. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying Ashe is necessarily bad, but for me, personally, every time I have an Ashe, they run it down. They just suck. It's like watching a bot play. They're like this, like they don't even have thumbs, which I guess doesn't make sense for mouse, but whatever. It's like they don't have thumbs. They literally can't play the game. It's like every time I pan over to watch the Ashe, it's like a turret. Ashe is supposed to be about kiting, and they never freaking kite, man. So I don't know what it is. I have a personal vendetta against this champ. Every time I see someone lock at him, I just want to dodge. Probably different for you guys, but for me, that's how it is. Aesol, pretty spooky. Aesol, okay, so Aesol is really only played by one tricks. So there is that advantage. It means they probably know how to play the champ, but Aesol's not that great. And on the off chance you haven't played a ton of Aesol games, you're probably useless, so it's spooky. Azir, kind of the same deal as Aesol, mostly a one-trick champ. And also, like, sometimes a Azir R can actually troll you. Like, they bring the most powerful goddamn 16-0 Darius into your team, and you're like, oh boy. Or they just try to go for some ego play, and they, like, run in there trying to, like, get this, like, look, man, I got this Twitch clip to get for you guys. And they, like, ult 4 people, and, like, they just die in the process. But, you know, it's not like it's a bad champ or anything. Bard, honestly, kind of extremely shook. It's definitely a one-trick champ. So they definitely know how to play the champ. But kind of like Aesol and Azir, if they don't one-trick it, it's even more scary. But the most terrifying part about Bard is that he can fucking ruin a team fight. He can carry it. His R can carry it, don't get me wrong, but it also can ruin it. If Bard does R at the wrong time, like let's say me, Galio, is trying to R one of my teammates, and I'm about to get this sweet 4-man knockup, but then boom, Bard R, it's just ruined, man. Like, he can totally... He can swing the fight either way. It can either be amazing for your team or horrible, so it's kind of an extremely shook champ. Blitzcrank. Not really spooky. I think most blitzes are also sort of one-tricky, or at least play a lot of a champ. And it's not like it's that hard to just land hooks. Obviously, if you miss them, he's completely useless, but blitz is generally pretty useful. Brand. Also not scary. Brand is, like, perma-useful. Even if he's, like, 0-16, if he just gets Leandries, it's like he's good. And he always does damage. So it's like, he's never terrible. Braum. Braum is sort of like the Alistar to me. It's a bit spooky because I just think that he's not that useful compared to like a Lulu or something, which is unfortunate because I like Braum as a champ. But Caitlyn, dodge. I swear to God, Caitlyn always wins lane and then loses game because Kate is just not that useful in ADC, or at the very least, it's hard for people, at least in like plat elo, to play around her. She's kind of unique as long as she's going to be like a DPS threat most of the time. She has to kind of kite, weave in and out of fights. So I just kind of find that most of the time, Caitlyn, I'd rather have another ADC, and it's kind of scary. Camille. I like Camille on my team, especially as a Galio player, because, I mean, you know, her R is very useful. I don't think she's the most difficult champ to pilot. She has a lot of escape, but if you don't want to die on Camille, you probably won't. So yeah. Cassiopeia, bit spooky. You know, she takes a little bit of skill, I guess. But, like, I mean, it's not like it's too bad. Cho'Gath. Cho'Gath is kind of spooky. I don't think Cho'Gath is that good of a champ. And I feel like a lot of Chos get into this, like, nom 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 mindset where they think they're, like, insanely tanky. And so they just kind of run into team fights, get blown up, realizing that, yes, you have 6,000 HP. But if you try to run 5v1, you're going to last 1.2 seconds. But at least you can prove to your friends that you have 6,000 HP, I guess, and you're the size of a goddamn skyscraper. Corki. Pretty spooky. Not gonna lie, Corki kind of useless right now. His damage is not bad, but it's hard to get there. His laning phase, he's pretty AFK, so you know that, like, let's say they have, like, I don't know, like if I'm playing support, for instance, and they have a Corki, or we have a Corki, and they have, like, a TF or something. Not that TF is, like, the best champ right now, but if they have TF, I know that TF is going to be doing things on the map. I know Corki's going to be sitting in lane and being like, why'd you guys die? Stuff like that. Darius. Not scary. Darius is like brain dead easy, perma useful, even behind does like 1,000 damage. Diana, same deal. Super easy champion to play, has great synergy with Mia, Galio mains R. You know, we take those. Draven, kind of shook, maybe even extremely shook. So Draven is strong. Like, I'm not saying he's bad. It's just that Smurfs, or like people who think they're really good, are the ones who play Draven the most. So they have a massive ego. Like, how many like Dravens do you see that have some like racist ass name or like something really fucked up as their name, and they're like gonna flame like their support if they miss a single hook or whatever? They're like one of the people that's most likely to run it down if like you int them at all or like make any misplay. They also ego really hard, and they think they're like the goddamn best league player of all time when there's 600 games like platform or something. Dr. Mundo kind of shook, because I don't think Mundo is that good, unfortunately. So when I see people play him, I'm like, you could have played Darius. Echo, not really spooky. Echo is pretty easy to play. He has a lot of damage. Elise, so I don't think Elise is that easy, and I don't think she's like crazy strong. But every time I've had an Elise on my team, they like pop the fuck off, and I think it's because she's kind of a one-trick champ, and she is pretty useful in a lot of ways. And I also think that most people don't know how to play against Elise. So if you have Elise on your team, it's like, oh, okay, nice. We have this like dedicated one-trick who's probably a fucking like dopa on their champ, and the enemy team is like, oh, I forgot Elise even is in this game, bro. Like, what do we do against her, kind of thing. Evelynn, kind of the same thing. Definitely a very one-tricky champ. And it's like, you know, she's pretty useful. It's hard to like punish her because she has perma stealth all the time. So unless you have like 9,000 pink wards all over the map, she's pretty useful. The only thing that sucks about Eve, I guess, is her team fight is kind of meh, and a lot of them are kind of scared to go in because they don't want to break their stealth or whatever. But she's pretty helpful. She can get some really nice picks. Her burst damage is crazy, so yeah. Ezreal, I'm gonna say bit spooky. You might be thinking like, wow, Ez is so safe though. Like, why are you scared? Well, I think the thing is, Ez is like the auto-fill champ, right? Like, you see some dude get auto-filled ADC, they pick Ezreal because he's so safe. So you know that there's a decent chance that the person's not that good. When they are good at Ez, he's like a goddamn nightmare for the enemy team. But there's a lot of times it's just kind of auto-filled. They like AFK farm and have like 10% KP. Fiddlesticks, a bit spooky, I would say. I was going to say not spooky or not scary because he's very useful and he's really strong right now in the meta. But that's also the thing is sometimes the meta champs get picked by people who have like one game on them. And they're like, oh, Herbert, Fiddlesticks so OP. I'm just going to 1v9 the game, guys. And they just absolutely run it. So it's kind of a little coin flippy, but for the most part, I'm not too spooked. Fiora, I'm extremely shook. Now you're probably thinking, isn't Fiora an absolute menace in top lane? She is, but most people in Plat don't know how to play her that well. And they also think they're really good. And Fiora is the kind of person who's like open top if they lose lane like at all. So yeah. Fizz. Fizz is a bit spooky. I do think people tend to overestimate their abilities on Fizz, so it can lead to some problematic plays, shall we say. But for the most part, he's like not the hardest champ to play. He's fairly useful. Not that common. So people still aren't like the best at the Fizz matchup. And I think he tends to win lane against most mages and such, so he's not the worst. Galio. Most of the time, I'm the one playing Galio. Now, it's debatable for my teammates if Galio is spooky or not. But let me put it this way. I'm going to be a lot more like harsh on people when I watch them play Galio. So it gives me a bit of spooks, but Galio's kind of perma-useful. Like, he has a lot of CC, a lot of roam potential. So if the person's at all decent at him, he's going to have some impact on the game. So it's only a bit spooky for me, just because I'm like a very avid Galio player, so I'm gonna be watching them with some close eyes, you know. Gameplank, it's pretty spooky. So Gameplank is good. They did just nerf him, which is a little more of that spook factor. But also, a lot of people play Gameplank just because they think he's broken, and they've never played Gameplank, or they played like one normal game against like Bronze 4s, and they're like suddenly, I'm ready to 1v9 the game, guys. Like, no, you're not, bro. No, you're not. Garen, not spooky. Such an easy-ass champ. Always does something. I mean, he has a point-and-click R, but like nukes people. It's like, you know, Garen's not ever going to just be completely useless. So it's like, it's not that scary. Gnar, a little bit spooky just because Gnar is like, I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's amazing. I think he's decent. I just don't feel like I've ever seen Gnar do like that much. So I'm like, oh, couldn't it have been like a Camille or something? But you know, not that spooky. Gragas, not spooky. Okay, Gragas R can mess up team fights sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't. And from my personal experience, most Gragases on my team are pretty good. Graves, really not spooky. Graves is like turbo broken. So easy to play. The only thing that makes me consider putting him a bit spooky is that some people who play him are like hella toxic, and they're also like, you guys don't deserve to win this game. I took all the kills of my last hit, super easy to hit auto attacks for my R, and now I'm fed, but I don't think you guys deserve to win. So then they just like run it down. So maybe a bit spooky is deserved, even though it's like turbo broken, stupid easy, can carry the game, disgustingly busted champ. It's just the players behind this bear of a man sometimes like to run it down because they get a little bit of an ego. Gwen, unfortunately, extremely shook. She's not that good right now. I don't think she's like the worst champ ever, but I just tend to find that Gwen ends up losing more than she ends up winning. So yeah, Hecarim kind of spooky. I mean, he's not like useless or anything, but Hecarim is just not the best jungler right now. They also sometimes Hecarims get a little too turbo murder horse mode, and they just kind of like run into the whole team and die. So it's kind of like that. What was the other champ I was talking about like that? I guess kind of like Fiora, where they have potential to be useful, but they just kind of end up throwing most of the time. Heimer, not spooky. I feel like Heimer is always super annoying. So it's like he's always going to do something. Heimer's a bit weaker in team fights, but you know that he's going to tilt the hell out of the enemy laner, especially if it's like some melee champ. Like I don't like playing against Heimer, for instance. So there's that. Alawi, I'm going to say spooky. She's pretty feast or famine. If Alawi gets ahead, she's like a goddamn monster that escaped from Chernobyl and is just ready to like beat the living shit out of the enemy team 5v1. So that's also really nice. But if she loses lane, it's like Alawi is the most useless thing ever. And she's only going to split push. The thing about Alawi is she will never team fight. She always split pushes. So it's like, she better be ahead, bro. Because if she's not ahead, yikes. Irelia, fucking dodge, bro. I mean, the champ is busted, but it's like, oh my god. All these plat players that play Irelia think they're like fucking insanely good at the game, and they're just terrible. Like, they just mess up everything. They go 0-7 in a lane and then ping the jungle. They're like, jungle gap! When they just lost, like, on one of the most brain-dead, disgustingly broken champs. Well, she's not brain-dead. She takes skill, but you know what I mean. She's really quite broken, but people don't play her well. Ivern, extremely shook. I mean, it's not like he's a bad champ. It's just there's definitely better junglers. So Ivern's a weird case where it's not so much the player that's playing Ivern that scares me. It's how my team interacts with him. Like bot lane leashing an Ivern. It's like, bro, what are you doing? Go get Prio in lane or like cheese them or something. Because you don't need to leash Ivern. But I cannot tell you how many times I've seen Ivern on my team. They like spam ping careful on the AD and support. And they just like AFK sit there. Because I mean, I guess those are the two most boosted rules anyway. So yeah, it makes sense. The other problem with Ivern is people don't use the dash that he gives them. They don't use the bushes creatively. It's like he's too much. He relies too much on the brain power of your teammates. And your teammates have no brain power. So it's unfortunate. Janna, not spooky. Stupidly broken champ. Well, they're not stupidly broken anymore because they have kind of nerfed her a lot, but she's still always pretty useful. Her R is nice. She has really good disengage. Yeah, I mean, she's just pretty useful. Jarvan. So Jarvan's an interesting case. I'm going to put him in spooky. So Jarvan is obviously, as a Galio player, has a lot of synergy. Don't get me wrong. His R plus my R, really nice. The thing is, a lot of J4s are overly aggressive. A lot of J4s don't know how to play the champ that well. So sometimes they pop off. That's really nice. He also falls off pretty hard, so you have to win the game early. And unfortunately, NA plat, pretty slow game pace. So it's like, you know, not the best champ in general for that. But yeah, he's all right, I guess. Jax is kind of spooky too. So Jax can definitely pop off. Like, don't get me wrong. He's definitely a very strong carry champ, and he's really, really easy to play. The thing is, sometimes Jaxes lose lane early. And they like don't realize they're playing a late game scaling champ, and they just want to FF15, and like they will just run it down the whole game. They also split push a lot, and split pushing can work, but sometimes it doesn't. And so yeah, it's a little spooky. Jace, extremely shook. So Jace is like, I don't think Jace is necessarily like a terrible champ, but I think he's really hard to play, and I think a lot of people lose lane early on Jace, and they're just kind of useless the rest of the game. So Jace, if he gets to late game, if he lanes well, he's a strong champ. Do not get me wrong in that regard. If Jace gets there, he's strong. It's just most plat players don't know how to get there. So they kind of just end up throwing the game. Jhin. Jhin is interesting. I'm going to say Jin's a bit spooky. So Jhin is not bad. Jhin is arguably really meta. It's just that Jhin is very unique compared to other ADCs. And a lot of Jhins are very scared. I mean, a lot of plat players in general are just like terrified of like playing the game. They don't want to walk up to anyone. But Jhin players especially kind of just want to sit like all the way back, click R, and be like, pew, pew. That does work sometimes, but a lot of the time, it's like I would just rather have another ADC. But Jhin can be really good, so it's kind of a bit spooky thing. Jinx is a little bit spooky. So Jinx is not the best laner. If she gets to late game, she's really strong. I would argue that Jinx is easier than like Jhin. Jinx is probably one of the easier ADCs in general. So it's not like it's... I don't want to, like, dodge or anything if I see Jinx. Like, it doesn't really, like, concern me. But she's, like... She's just kind of mid. Kind Kaisa. I'm gonna say Kaisa's not spooky. I feel like Kaisa is really strong. I like that Kaisa players tend to play more aggressively, which kind of fits my aggro play style too. And as a Galio player, you can set up a lot of stuff with Kaisa R. So yeah, I mean, she's pretty nice to have on your team. I feel like she's always pretty useful, high damage. I don't really know how hard she is to play personally, but I don't think it's too ridiculous. Kalista dodge. Kalista is hard to play. She also falls off pretty hard. She also can do some interesting stuff, let's say, with her R. Sometimes she might link to me, like if I'm playing her support, and that can be a great combo, don't get me wrong. But sometimes they don't know when's best to use it. And like I'm like about to E somebody and like set up play, and she's like, let me just R you real quick, bud. And I'm like, oh great. So it's like it's involuntary. Like yes, you don't have to launch yourself, but you can't stop yourself from getting pulled in by Kalista. So that alone makes it kind of annoying. Karma, Karma, I'm going to say, is not spooky. She's pretty easy to play. She has decent utility. There's definitely better enchanters than her, but I don't really see too many Karmas, like, run it down. Karthus. Karthus is going to go into spooky, and not just because he's a freaking ghost. So Karthus, he has a ton of damage. He's always, like, kind of useful. I mean, like, yeah, Karthus, not the hardest champ to play of all time. Obviously, you got to hit your Qs for maximum damage potential, but he's always kind of useful. You can kind of go into team fights, die, and still be useful for 7 seconds. The thing with Karthus players, though, kind of like Graves, kind of like Draven, is like a lot of these players are smurfs. A lot of people who play Karthus are smurfing. They might be like Diamond 4 smurfing and Plat, so they're like barely better than the Plat players. They think they're like God's gift. They think they're part of like God's green dick or whatever, and they think they're like the best players ever, so they might want to throw the game. Katarina, extremely shook, potentially dodge. Honestly, probably more like dodge. Cat is not a good champ in my opinion. Now I'm a little bit biased because Galio kind of just absolutely dumpsters Katarina, at least in my experience. I feel like she's really hard to win lane against. I think in like bronze and silver, like you just snowball really easily, so she's really strong, and maybe gold too. But in Plat, I feel like most cats kind of just don't do anything. They lose lane really hard no matter what their matchup is. They try to roam and they coin flip, but they mess it up. They die like 4 times. They're super behind. They do no damage anymore. Yeah, I just think she's actually a pretty high skill champ, so no. Kale, extremely shook. So Kale is pretty much useless until like level 11. Now, yes, good Kales are not like this, but a lot of people who play Kale just want to AFK farm. And when they do that, it's like, oh, bro. If they're like, imagine it's like Kale into like Garen or something. Arguably not the worst matchup for Kale, don't get me wrong. Or like Irelia is even worse if it's like the enemy Irelia. They could very easily snowball her. And then we have this fed top laner monster to deal with. Useless Kale until like level 16 at that point because she's so behind. And it's like, dude, oh my god, you just want to AFK farm. They just don't do anything. So yeah, Kayn. Kayn, I'm going to say, is a bit spooky. Sometimes they go for overly ambitious plays. They also can be like kind of this like toxic player sort of thing. But Kayn's easy to play. He has a lot of damage, a lot of utility in some ways. I mean, he can go, you know, stall some time with his R. He has a knock-up. He can steal objectives really well. That's like his good thing. So Kayn is a good champ. He's very strong. Like, don't get me wrong. But sometimes people go for like overly ambitious plays on Kayn. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. So yeah, Kennen. Okay, I like never see Kennen, so it's a bit hard to say. But most Kennens that I have seen are pretty good at their champ, and he's actually not a bad champ at all. He has a lot of utility. So I'm gonna say not spooky. Kha'Zix. Kha'Zix is gonna go into spooky. So Kha'Zix tends to snowball pretty hard. He's not that hard to play. But again, kind of like the Graves, kind of like the Draven, kind of like the Karthus. A lot of toxic players on Kha'Zix. And also, he's not that useful in team fights. Once it gets to late game, if you haven't won, it's pretty bad because no one's ever really isolated anymore. So Kha'Zix is kind of in that spooky category. Kindred, kind of the same thing. She can pop the absolute fuck off. Don't get me wrong. Kindred can go absolutely giga ham when she needs to. But the thing is, she's really squishy. Early on, it's like a survival horror game. She does pair really, really well with Galio, though, I will say. Like, you can R Kindred in her R, and then your CC is really useful after that, because CC in Kindred R is, like, king. Because, you know, basically, you CC them the moment they're out of the R, they're, like, dead. And you can help her with early invades, because she is going to invade a lot with her mark. So, yeah, she is definitely a great teammate for, like, my playstyle as Galio. But I do think that Kindreds can also be kind of toxic, kind of a recurring theme here with jungles. And they also are very feast or famine. If Kindred's really behind, she's pretty useless. Kled. Kled is not the best champ in my opinion. I think Kled tends to kind of run it. I'm going to put him in Spooky. Now, one-trick Kleds are not bad, and they do win lane a lot of the time, but I think Kleds can sometimes lead to some really overly aggressive plays, and it kind of gives me the willies when I see a Kled just kind of like click R and run past 3 towers to go dive somebody, so yeah, it can be a little scary. Kog'Maw, we're going to put in Bit Spooky. Kog'Maw on your team, it's like they either pop off or they don't. And so it's sort of like that feast or famine mentality, right? It's like you see Kog'Maw on your team, you're like, okay, well, I hope this Kog'Maw gets fed, bro. And they also can be a little toxic. Most Cogs are pretty chill, but sometimes they're like, why didn't you snowball me? Why didn't you come bot when I'm down 6 kills? It's like, bro, come on, man. LeBlanc. So LeBlanc got buffed recently. I don't think she's a bad champ anymore. I don't think she's even that hard to play. But I do think that we'll put her not Spooky. I think she's pretty easy to play. I don't think she's like the best champ ever, and I think you have to be a bit good with your positioning, but she's not that bad. Lee Sin. Lee Sin's a dodge. Lee Sin players, for one, could be smurfing. But 2, Lee Sin, if you check Lee Sin's like global win rate on like every server and like every rank, it's like 47% or something. He's hard to play. He's not the best champ right now. People really are toxic on Lee Sin too. Like they're probably one of the most willing champs to like run it down mid lane if anything goes wrong. And they can just kind of create some bad situations for you with their R, and they like to like dive towers a lot. So Lee is very coin flippy. I don't like seeing him. Leona, not scary at all. Super easy champ to play. Has a lot of utility. Lilia. Lilia's kind of the same boat to me. I feel like she's always kind of useful. A lot of dot damage. Her sleep can be her sleep can be game winning sometimes. I don't think she's that hard to play. Lissandra's a bit spooky. She's easy to play. I don't think she's that great. A lot of the most popular mid laners right now are like Victor and like longer range mages. Lissandra doesn't do too well into them. So she's kind of like, she's okay. Lucian. This is a tough one. I think most Lucians I've seen actually do pretty well. I'm going to put Lucian in not scary. Kassadin. Dodge. So Kassadin. Everyone knows the racist Kassadin meme. I swear to God, it's true. I see that all the time. It's like you're going to see the N-word in chat if you have a Kassadin on your team. Kassadin also can lose lane extremely hard, and it's going to be hard for him to recover. Now, if Kassadin plays well, isn't racist, and scales, then he's super useful, but most of the time, I don't see that. Lulu, not spooky at all. I mean, it's Lulu. She's like brain dead easy to play, disgustingly useful. Lux, spooky. Now, you're probably thinking, didn't you just say Lulu was brain dead? And like, yes, Lux is also brain dead. Don't get me wrong. But Lux players are also super brain dead. So the problem is, Lux mid, terrible champ. Like, it loses to everything. It's so predictable, and it's just really bad. Lux support, not the worst. It's good for cheesing. The problem is, if Lux doesn't get ahead, that's her only use is damage. So if she's not fed, she's useless. She has like no utility besides her bind, I guess. But yeah, I just feel like Lux players have no hands. They have like no mechanics. They're just kind of bad at the game, to be honest. Pretty boosted because the champ is so disgustingly easy, and it's very useless unless it gets ahead. Malphite, unfortunately, same thing. Malphite's really easy to play. His R is pretty useful. I will say Malphite with Galio R is kind of insane, but Malphite loses lane to a lot of people. He's not a very good champ right now, to be honest. He's kind of lacking in like everything. He's just not that good, and I just kind of feel like the people who play him aren't that good. Malzahar, kind of the same, maybe a bit spooky. Malzahar R is obviously super useful. And Malzahar is disgustingly easy. If you lose lane on Malzahar, like, what are you doing kind of thing. But I just think that most Malz players are very elo inflated. So if you're like a plat Malz one trick, you're probably more like a silver player because it's just so easy to play that your fundamentals are probably a bit lacking. So your macro might be off, etc., etc. That being said, champ is always useful, so whatever. Maokai, extremely shook. I feel like Maokai just kind of sucks, if I'm being honest. The other thing is sometimes you see people play Maokai like top, and I'll see like a goddamn Kraken Slayer. I'm like, bro, what that Maokai building, bro? Why is there a Kraken Slayer there? Like, hello? Master Yi. Dodge. So Yi, don't get me wrong, Yi is really strong. He's getting nerfed next patch. He's obviously brain dead. You just go, use click Q, right? Like super easy. The only thing is, very feast or famine. If Yi gets behind, he's kind of not the best. They also can be pretty toxic. They're like, why aren't you playing around me? I'm Master Yi. Why didn't you follow me to the tier 2 tower? It's like, bro, come on, man. So, I don't know. It's like they're either 0-15 or like 15-0. And there's like no in between. I've never seen like a Yi be like even. They're always just like hyper fed or not fed at all. It also has no utility. Literally zero. So it's all damage, kind of like Lux. Like, at least Lux has a bind. Yi has nothing. And Yi is also a power farmer, not a ganker. So he really won't help your lane pressure that much at all. He is good with Galio. Like I will say, you can definitely support a Yi pretty well. Because you just kind of CC them and then Yi clicks Q one time and wins the fight. But if someone picks Yi blind and they pick like a full CC team, yeah, Yi is not that great. So I mean, he's kind of a dodge situation. MF is not spooky. Such an easy champ, like so easy. Her R is just disgusting. I mean, she's not the best ADC or anything, but like it's like they're not gonna like turbo int. They do kind of have no hands, kind of like Lux. I don't really see like MF like kiting people that often or anything, but it's like you don't even need hands. Mordekaiser, kind of the same thing. I mean, he's like so brain dead easy, kind of strong. He wins lane against a decent amount of people. And his R can always be pretty useful. Complete. So I don't find Mord to be that scary on my team. Morgana, also not scary. Fairly easy. Obviously, if they miss their Q, they're kind of not the best. But she can always R. She can always use her Black Shield. Just a useful champ. Nami, also not spooky. Most enchanters, for the record, not spooky. Enchanters, very boosted, very easy to play. It's like, how do you even lose if you're playing an enchanter? Oh, so it's never enchanter on the enemy team. She always does something. Her R is useful. She has a heal. Bubble is nice. This is a nice champ. Easy to play. Nasus, bit spooky. Most of the time for me, a lot of scaling champs are kind of spooky because it's like, bro, you don't do anything for like 25 minutes. And then you're like, why is my team losing, man? And it's like, well, man, it's like kind of a 4v5 over here. Nasus is stupid easy to play. Don't get me wrong. His slow is disgusting. A lot of nice characteristics. So he's not as bad as Kale to me. Like, at least Kale takes a little bit of skill to play. Kassadin, most Nasus players are not toxic. They're not racist. So that's nice. But he is a little useless for like a while. So kind of like Corki. Can be useful, but a lot of the times just kind of chills. Nautilus. I'm going to say not scary. Most Nautiluses are nice. They're good for me, for my Galio R, to like go on when they go in. I mean, you know, it's not that hard of a champ to play. It's pretty useful, so why be scared? Nico. Nico, I'm going to say, is also not scary. She's a very easy champ to play, and, like, she kind of wins lane against quite a few people. So, I mean, you know, it is what it is. Nidalee is either extremely shook or dodge. I'm going to say extremely shook. Nidalee does a lot of damage, but she's really high skill to play. People are less toxic on Nidalee than they are on, like, Yi or, like, Graves or something, in my opinion. But she's really, really hard to play, and it's like you have to be this power farming, enemy camp invading jungler that you see on like the Korean server, for instance, and like on NA plat you just kind of don't get that as often. So it's like Nocturne, I'm gonna say, is actually, you might be surprised by this, I'm gonna say spooky. So you're probably thinking, bruh, Nocturne is so easy, like his R is disgusting, he's like so easy to play. Also, you and Galio, like, great synergy, right? Yes, but I actually don't think Nocturne is that good of a champ. Like, Nocturne falls off a cliff. And sometimes Nocturnes just are the wrong people. It's like you guys are fighting Drake. And it's like, okay, well, obviously you want to, like, R into the pit. So I can R you, bro. Like, let me R you, bro. And then they go, like, find the one person who's, like, off on those. So they can be like, I got a solo kill, guys. Like, I was like, all right, bro. All right, so Nunu. Nunu's a bit spooky. I think Nunu is generally pretty useful. He has quite literally snowballs the early game. Great ganker, really hard to escape Nunu ganks. Has the potential to combo wombo with Galio R for sure. But he also kind of falls off. And NA plat is definitely a pretty like late game, mid late game focused meta. So I do think Nunu is like not bad. Graves is like just way better. Most Nunu players not toxic, but some of them definitely run it down. Like some Nunus that, like a Nunu that misses every snowball is like a dodge, bro. Like, for real. But most of them don't do that, so, you know. Olaf is not spooky. He's really easy to play. I don't think he's as broken as he used to be after some nerfs, but he's pretty easy. He'll win lane a lot of the time. He's generally fairly useful. Yes, he falls off, and I have been kind of biasing the fall off champs to like the spooky realm. But I think Olaf is decent. So Orianna, I'm a little spooked when people play Orianna. You're probably thinking, why though? Because she's like pretty easy and she's pretty useful. Like her R is nice. Don't get me wrong, she is. The thing about Ori though is a lot of people don't have that many games on her because she's really boring. Like Orianna, I'm sorry to all the Orianna mains out there. I don't mean any offense, but like, bro, how do you play this champ for like hundreds of games, bro? It's like so boring. Your solo kill potential is like not there at all, so you're never gonna kill people in lane like you're playing Galio. Galio can actually solo kill people. It can happen. Like I've done it a lot. Galio is more fun to play, bro. Like you actually get to run around the map and like do things. Orianna, you just kind of like sit in lane. You're like a lane neutralizer. You hardly ever lose lane unless it's like Zed and then you just get shit on. But like you hardly ever lose lane. But she's just kind of boring. And I feel like most Ori players are just decent at her. They're not ever one-tricks because it's hard to one-trick her. So I always feel like, why didn't you just play Vigo or something? Ornn. I actually love Ornn. Ornn is always useful on your team. He's such a wholesome-ass character, which, I mean, obviously that's just lore. But, like, I just like seeing Ornn, like, waddle around. And the best thing, he upgrades your items, bro. He fucking upgrades them. It's like free stats for having Ornn on your team. It's kind of awesome. And he's really useful. He's got great utility. He's tanky. He does well in lane. His R is pretty awesome. He can go in and I can R him as Galio. It's like, yeah, bro, or... Pantheon. Pantheon fucking scares me, bro. Pantheon, it's like, okay, yes. He has some pretty good qualities. His R is awesome. It's kind of like a Galio R. He has pretty good burst damage. Not bad in lane. He can definitely win a lot of lanes. But I do feel like Panth players are way too confident. Like, literally yesterday, I had this Panth support that had like 10 deaths. And I'm like, bro, what are you doing? And I'm like, what? I mean, we did win that game. Like, don't get me wrong. That's just because we hit a Darius. Darius, who, like, popped off. But Pantheon was just, like, always going in. And, like, always was dead before every objective because he's just so aggressive. Panth is not the best champ either. He falls off really hard. So, yeah, if I see him on my team, I generally assume they're going to int. That tends to be the case, unfortunately. Poppy. Poppy, if I see a Poppy on my team, I'm like, all right, that's cool. She's pretty useful. A lot of CC, pretty good against like dashy wind shitters and stuff. Yeah, she's pretty good. Pyke scares me. I see someone play Pyke and I assume they're just gonna be bad. Now Pyke can be really useful, or he just gets one shot all the time. Most Pikes that I have get one shot. Pikes in the enemy team, they're like 1v9 goddamn machines. So it really just depends. I don't think Pyke is that good compared to like something stupidly brain dead like Lulu. So yeah, I don't like to see him on my team. Kiana, same thing. So Kiana is broken as fuck. Do not get me wrong. Like Kiana is so stupid. Like there's so much damage. The durability patch like didn't do anything to her, but she is kind of hard to play. Her R is always useful. Don't get me wrong, but she can lose lane to quite a few people because she is kind of usable early because people pick First Strike now, and First Strike is not as good early game. And I just kind of feel like Kiana players are toxic as fuck for one thing, over aggro. And they kind of just run in and die. And she's hard to play. So most of the time I see Kiana on my team, I'm like, well, this is going to be tough. Quinn. Quinn is like almost a dodge. Maybe extremely shook. Probably a dodge. I think Quinn sucks. I think she's such a bad champ. And I feel like she loses lane to like everybody. There are some Quinn one-tricks that are really good. Don't get me wrong. But every time I see Quinn, I just want to like get the fuck out of there. Because, I don't know. I just don't feel like they're that good. Rakan. I like Rakan. He's not, yeah, Rakan's not spooky. I feel like Rakan has a lot of utility. He's kind of like this, he's kind of Galio-esque in a way. He's got some really good qualities. Rammus is interesting. On paper, Rammus is really obviously awesome to have with Galio because he can R in and he can do a lot of good things. But a lot of times people who play Rammus kind of like to get this like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle 1v9 fantasy in their head and they kind of like go in too much. So I'm going to put him in bit spooky. Most Rammuses I've had are useful. Shout out most of you Rammus players. But some people like to go a little too hard in the paint, and it kind of ends up trolling the game. Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is interesting. I don't really see Rek'Sai that often on my team, but when I do, she tends to do decently. I rarely see a Rek'Sai just completely run it, although there was this one time. There was like, there was a Rek'Sai on the enemy team, and she quite literally was winning the game. Like, she was really far ahead. They're really far ahead. But apparently someone like took her like red buff or something, so she just ran it down. So maybe Rek'Sai players are toxic. Maybe. I don't know. From my experience, they're pretty chill though, so I'm just gonna put her a bit spooky. It's like, you know, it's a decent champ, it's not too bad. Rel spooks me. Rel top is like a thing because some like YouTuber was like, guys, Rel top is really good. Let me show it off in this normal game. Haha. And it's like, okay. So people see some like challenger YouTuber playing in a normal with silvers, slapping people as a Rel top, and they think like, yep, I can definitely do that first time ranked against people my skill level on a champ I never play. They'd run it down. But also, Rel is just not a very good champ, in my opinion. She's kind of eh. I've never seen a Rel pop off. Let me put it that way. I just never have seen a Rel pop off. So for that reason alone, it spooks me. Renata, not spooky. Broken champ. W is insane. R is insane. Stupid easy to play. Like all enchanters, very boosted. I know they have no hands, but I know they'll be useful regardless. Renekton. Renekton is kind of spooky. Renekton wins lane a lot of the time. Don't get me wrong. But he falls off a cliff. I don't think he's like... I just don't think he's that good of a champ, so he just kind of spooks me, unfortunately. Rengar is like a bit spooky. So Rengar is sort of like Yi-esque, although I do think Rengar does a bit more damage from behind than Yi does. So Rengar's a bit feast or famine. I have found a couple like kind of toxic Rengars, but they're not the worst. I think for the most part, Rengar is pretty useful. Not that hard to play. Kind of a one-trick champ. People really like to one-trick him, so they tend to know their champ pretty well. So I'm not too scared of that. Okay. Oh god, I swear to god, if there's anything that's the king of this tier list, it is Riven. Riven scares me so badly. I see Riven and I literally consider dodging so hard, because I swear to god, there is not a single good plat Riven. If you're good at Riven, you made it. The champ is busted. Don't get me wrong, if you don't want to die in Riven, you just boop, 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 hop, hop, hop away, and she does a ton of damage. She's super tanky. She's overpowered as fuck and always has been, and Riot doesn't give a shit. But if you're really bad at her, it's not the kind of champ like Yi where you just click one button and win. You have to click like 6 buttons to win. People get way overconfident because they play Riven. I cannot tell you how many like 2 million point Rivens I have seen that just run it the fuck down. Very rarely do I see my top laner do 6k damage in a game that's like 35 minutes long and they're not even behind. I've seen that with Riven. Riven, I type to them, I'm like, I've never seen a good Riven in this elo. Yes, it's toxic. And they're like, oh, fuck you, man. I'm like, well, prove me wrong, I guess. And they never do. I'm sorry. I have a serious vendetta against this champion. I swear to God, I have never seen a good Riven on my team ever. And the day I do is the day I maybe consider putting her down here. But until then, she gets to go with right next to new champ of the patch. It's that bad. Rumble. Rumble is always pretty useful, I think. So he's not scary. Not that hard to play. His R is pretty helpful. He has a lot of damage. He can win lane against a lot of people. Nice. Rise. Extremely shook. Maybe even dodge. Probably dodge. First of all, Rise players, you guys are not mentally stable. I've been on your subreddit. Therapy. It's a thing. Go get it. Besides that, the champ is just woefully underpowered because Faker loves playing Rise in pro games, and it's Faker, so he can play anything. But in reality, Rise is not a good champ for him for solo queue. His R, it's like, dude, his R is so hard to coordinate without voice comms. Like, what do you do? How do you tell people to go in your little sparkly portal to do what you want to do? And also, like, where the portal is going. They might not trust you. You literally have to be like, type it out. Oh, whoops. But yeah, it's like, bro, unfortunately, Rise is just a bad champ. I don't think the players at him are bad. I think most players are actually really good. I think I've seen a lot of Rise players with hands, bro. Like, they're kiting and shit, doing everything they could possibly do to win. The champ does no damage. They just can't win. It's really unfortunate. Samira. Samira's extremely shook to me. So Samira could absolutely 1v9 the game, and she can be turbo broken. If she gets ahead, though, it's kind of like the Master Yi thing. I met this one Samira who was like, I swear to God, 13 years old, and was like calling us like horrific racial slurs. Yes, they were ahead. Yes, they carried the game. but it's like some 13-year-old Smurf kid, and like they're toxic. If she goes like 0-3, she's done. Like the game is over. She can't do anything. She's completely useless if she's behind. Turbo broken up ahead. I don't like Feast or Famine champs, so that's what it is. Sejuani, bit spooky. I don't think Sejuani's that strong. I think she has good utility. I don't think they like turbo it that often, but I have seen some top lane Sejuani's just like hard lose lane and just do nothing the rest of the game. So I'm always a little apprehensive when they're on my team, but it's not that in the world. Senna, not that spooky. She's really strong. Pretty easy to play. I have to say, Senna players do seem to actually have mechanics, unlike Enchanter mains, because I guess it's, you know, it's an ADC, you have to kite. And most Sennas I've seen are actually pretty good. Like, most Sennas I've seen have a good scoreline, and they do good stuff. So, not spooky. Seraphine, also not scary, because, I mean, it's just so broken. I've played Seraphine a few games in, like, ARAMs and normals, and, like, you know, she's just insanely... She is fun to play, like, don't get me wrong, she's fun to play. Very useful. Her R is crazy, so if I see her on my team, I assume she'll hit some crazy R at some point in the game, and that can win us the game. Set. Set's a little spooky. Set, to me, he's a good champ. That people play him very aggro, because, I mean, I guess they can, but, like, sometimes Set players like to kind of, like, overcommit to things, and they just kind of troll. Shaco is like a bit spooky to me. I don't think Shaco is the best champ. Now, the one good thing about Shaco is only one tricks play him. So most Shaco players know what they're doing. It's just that Shaco, sometimes, if Shaco gets all the kills, for instance, he's probably not going to 1v9 the game. And Shaco is quite good at getting the last hits on kills. So if Shaco has all the gold on my team, I'm a little concerned for the state of the game. But for the most part, yeah, I mean, it's like, he's just a weird champ. It's like, you have to kind of play around his unique play style, and a lot of plat players kind of can't do that. I don't think he's bad, and one tricks do play him, so, you know. Shen. I love Shen. I feel like every Shen I've ever seen, my team or otherwise, always does well. He's useful. His R is really great. He's tanky. He can be good, especially if you have Galio and Shen on the same team. It's like, bro, imagine you have Galio, Shen, and yes, I know he's dodged, but imagine you have Galio, Shen, Yi. That Yi can just go in there and get like 2 people ulting him. It's like crazy, bro. Shyvana, not spooky. Shyvana is like disgustingly strong. Now, the only reason I'm kind of having some PTSD in my head, I'm thinking a bit spooky, because some people lock her in who've never played her, and they're like, oh, she's so broken that I'll just win the game off that. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they've literally first time Shyvana and just clap cheeks, like, but sometimes they don't. So we'll put her in a bit spooky, because sometimes the really strong champs tend to attract first timers, and they sometimes run it down. But she's very easy to play, has insane damage. The Frostfire build remains to be broken as fuck, and still like one taps people. So I mean, you know. Silco with TFT, so I don't know why he's even there. Singed. Singed scares me. Singed used to be good. I know he's getting buffed, I think, next patch. Pretty sure. He's pretty bad right now. And yes, pretty much only one tricks play him. But some of them are like these proxy monsters that you have to kind of like play around. And like, I don't know. They're just kind of weird to play with. I don't like seeing them too often. Sion. Sion's a tough one. So Sion can sometimes be like the 0-10 like Baus FFS like enjoyer who split pushes and wins the game. Sometimes they're too much of a Baus enjoyer, and they're not as good as the Baus, obviously, because they're like plat. They feed the enemy Darius. The Darius pentakills the team. Sion never gets the split push, and like, yeah, so Sion's kind of coin flippy. I think most of the time I see Sion, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be hard because the enemy top is going to have a lot of kills. So it depends, you know, it really depends. If I see Sion on my team and they have like, I don't know, a Kali top or something, then I'm like, all right, this could actually be okay. But if I see like Sion and they pick like Irelia on the enemy team, I'm like terrified, bro. Like, it's very matchup dependent on who on the enemy Sion. So yes, I know this is about the teammates, but it does matter what the enemy team is playing when I have them on my team. Sivir. Not really scary. She's really strong right now, and I feel like she's pretty easy to play. So most of the time I see a Sivir player, and I'm like, all right, they'll do something. Skarner has me shook, bro. Skarner's a one-trick champ, so at least people know how to play the champ, but I just feel like Skarner is not that good. I mean, yes, his R can do some pretty crazy things, but most of the time, I just feel like I would rather have literally any other jungler except for like a Felios jungle. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel. So no. Not scary, bro. Oh, 1 second. No, never mind. Thought I was gonna sneeze there. Guess I did. Sona's not scary because I just think that all enchanters are brain dead easy and always fucking useful. She's kind of just Seraphine because Riot put no effort into Seraphine. So yeah, same champ. Soraka.
Charge complete.
So, okay, maybe this is the one time I'm going to be a little different. So Soraka, she is strong. Don't get me wrong. It's just a lot of Soraka players have 0 hands. And unlike the Seraphine, the Lulu, the Sona, all she does is heal. They all heal too. But Soraka has much less utility. She only has raw healing. She's somewhat countered by Grievous Wounds. They did nerf it. So she's somewhat countered by that. She has a silence. But if she walks into silence range, she gets one-shot very often. I just kind of feel like of all the enchanters, Soraka tends to be the one that can potentially be useless. Whereas I never feel like Sona's useless. I never feel like Seraphine is useless. Sometimes Soraka's useless. It doesn't scare me to see it on my team, but I'm like, okay, also she does less damage than these guys, just like, by the way. So it just kind of like, it gives me like, I think about it. I see Soraka on my team, I think about it. Swain is going to be not spooky, I think. Swain is quite strong. He's pretty easy to play. Silas is turbo broken right now. He is so strong, but he actually is a little hard to play. I also think that some people pick Silas because they don't know, like, or they haven't played him. They just think he's strong, so they pick Silas. The other problem is some people pick Silas and they have no idea, like, what, like, even Galliard. Some people don't really ever play Galio, but they play Silas. They pick a Galliard. They're like, okay, this is easy enough to use, but maybe they use it at the wrong time. Like, I've seen plenty of enemy Silases use my own R against me, and it's like the worst possible use of my R. And I'm like, bro. So there is that factor, right? Like, if they don't play these champs, they might not be the best with their Rs. Like, maybe they don't know how to use Pantheon R that well, or like Fiora R maybe, because that takes some skill, I guess. Anyway, Silas is spooky to me because he's a bit hard to play, very strong, but I feel like he's attractive to people because he's so strong. So yeah, Syndra scares me like a lot because I don't think she's that good. I know mostly one tricks are the ones playing her, but I just never really see Syndra be that useful, unfortunately. Tom Kench is like the opposite of spooky. If there's like Tom Kench is such a disgusting champ, bro. He's so underrated. I swear to God, like so tanky, ton of utility. Just great champ. Like, I mean, he's just so insane. Talia actually scares me like a lot. That's probably really controversial to some people, but Talia can use her R terribly and either cuck your team by blocking them off with the wall, or she like just goes in and dies. They can miss their skill shots. I just find that Talia players kind of sometimes run it down. Not gonna lie to you. Talon's interesting. Talon's pretty feast or famine. I think he has a lot of survival skills. So it's like if your teammate who's playing Talon knows how to play him, he can be pretty strong. But a lot of Talon players kind of just don't play him that well. So I see Talon and I'm like, all right, like this is probably gonna go either way. Taric, I love having Taric on my team. I feel like Taric is really useful. I don't know how hard Taric is to play because I've never played him. I don't think he's insanely hard. I know he has a decent skill ceiling. Skill 4, not too bad. But Taric is pretty useful. He has quite a strong ultimate. He's a strong champ right now. Teemo is like a dodge to me. Most Teemos just don't do anything, man. They lose lane all the time. They're very strange with their playstyles. Like, some of them just like to be like sitting in like a bush for like 10 hours waiting for someone to walk by. Mushrooms can be good. But I just feel like Teemo is not in a good spot right now, and I've never seen a Teemo pop up on my team or the enemy team, so, yeah. Thresh. Thresh is going to go in bit spooky. He's pretty hard to play. He's harder than Blitzcrank for sure. He's very useful, though. His utility is great. The other part of Thresh that makes him scarier is that his Lantern relies on the IQ of your teammates. Any champ that somewhat relies, and unfortunately as a Galio player, sometimes I feel this too, that relies on your team not having room temperature IQ can be pretty hard. Well, let's say you have Thresh and like Samira, right? Theoretically, this is a very strong combo because Samira can kind of go in, and if things get rough, Thresh can be behind her and she can click the lantern and get out, theoretically. The issue is the Thresh is like, oh, my Samira is going to be smart, so I'm going to let her go in and do her combo and then get out so we can get a very free trade. So I'll put the lantern. Oh, she's not clicking the lantern. Oh, she's dead. Oh, she's pinging me now. Oh, that's what happens. Tristana. Tristana is like interesting. She's pretty strong. Like, she's a good lane bully. And most Tristanas I've seen actually do pretty well. The only reason it gets me a little spooked is because of the nature of the champ. She has to whoop in there, which can be good as Galio. You know, you kind of want your teammates to whoop in there. But sometimes they whoop in there and then they just get instantly blown up. So she, unlike most ADCs, Tristana is a more aggro, kind of like Samira. I think she's easier to play than Samira, and she's not as feast or famine-y. It's also a lot easier to lane bully as Tristana compared to Samira, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't think she's like terrifying or anything, but she has that little risk factor of jumping in. Trundle is like such an easy champ. I feel like Trundle will always do something. Even if he like loses lane, even if he's not doing the best jungle, he can always split push, just like hit the tower. So he's always like something. Tryndamere. Trynd is interesting. Trynd is a bit spooky. Now Trynd is sort of Trundle-esque in that he can always kind of do something. And his R makes it a lot harder for him to fail. His R is also really good with Gallior because he can just go in there and not die. And I know Tryndamere players want to go in too. And so it gives me the opportunity. It's just some Tryndameres are a bit low IQ because they just spin to win on everything, kind of like Garen. No, you know, I'll put him in not spooky. I think it's kind of hard to punish even a stupid Tryndamere. Twisted Fate. It's interesting. I think TF is kind of extremely shook. Now, a good TF is a monster. I mean, they can definitely put a lot of pressure on the map. But TF has very low solo kill potential. He can lose a lane, and he can get snowballed on pretty hard. Like, if you play a Zed on the enemy team against your mid lane TF, that's scary, bro. I mean, TF has to fight for his life. Zed has to click like 2 buttons and wins the thing. Like, I mean, TF has to trade with Zed like 4 times. If Zed just clicks R, he probably just kills him. So TF is hard to play because he has no damage. He has to have a lot of macro knowledge. Basically, you're hoping that the TF is really good, because if they're not, they're just like a goddamn atrocious, useless thing. I've been that TF sometimes. I think I know how to play TF decently well, but sometimes you just get snowballed on really hard, and it's hard to do anything. So TF is extremely shook for me. I mostly doubt plat TFs, unfortunately. So if I see them on my team, I'm like, damn, this is going to be hard, but maybe we'll win. Sometimes they pop off. Twitch. Twitch is interesting. Twitch is a very strong champ. Twitch does a lot of good things. But Twitch players sometimes are smurfy. Sometimes they get a little toxic. And I do think that Twitch sometimes gets like into this mental state that if they're not fed, the game's unwinnable, and they kind of tilt. So I'm going to put him there. He's a strong champ, but I do think the mental of the players behind him tends to hold him back a little bit. Udyr, not spooky. Now, if we're noticing something about the not spooky category, just real quick, they're all so easy to play. Except maybe like, I mean, no, Action's pretty easy to play. Anivia is a little hard to play. Most of them are really not hard to play. So most of the time, if I see my teammate lock in an easier champ, I know they'll at least do something. If they lock in a harder champ, except for Yi, yeah, it's going to be harder to win the game. It just kind of is that way. I'm sure in like Diamond, this list looks different. But as you can see, from a platform perspective, the easier the champs, the less spooky they tend to be. Anyway, moving on from that, Udyr. Udyr is just like, he's really hard to kill. He's good at split pushing. He's pretty nice, like, for R'ing as a Galio, for going in. And he just kind of always does something. I've never had an Udyr on my team just go like 0-12. Most of them go at least even or sometimes get ahead. And I think he's quite easy to play, pretty slept on. He's getting reworked soon, so we'll see how that affects him. But for now, not spooky. Urgot. Urgot is not hard to play. He's pretty decent in lane. He has a good split push. A fed Urgot can 1v9 the game. But sometimes a behind Urgot does not do that. And I think sometimes they tilt. So he's going to go a bit spooky just because he's a little snowball dependent. Varus is extremely shook. Varus, I've never seen Varus really do that well. I'm sure there's a couple out there who are good at him, but Varus is hard to play relative to most ADCs. He has crazy damage, don't get me wrong, but he's hard to play. He loses lanes sometimes. He's supposed to be a lane bully, but I feel like Varus never actually lane bullies. So it's interesting that way. So a lane bully that can't lane bully that well, not the best. And from my experience, most of the time I see this on my team and I'm like, bro, why couldn't you have just picked something stupid easy like Jinx or something? Or like, I don't know. Yeah, Jinx, I guess. Vayne. Vayne is interesting. Vayne, I like having Vaynes because as Galio, you can really help her snowball. You can peel for her. You can CC targets and spoon feed her the kills. They love to get spoon fed. So there's a lot of great qualities about Vayne. But she's extremely feast or famine. I mean, yes, behind Vayne still does damage, but Vayne's mentals, when they're behind, goes down the toilet. So I'm going to put her in Spooky, because it's not like Varus. Like, Vayne is... I've definitely had a lot of Vaynes that actually pop off. Like, to their credit, there's quite a few Vaynes I've had that, like, honestly, carry the game. But sometimes they really don't. And she's pretty popular, so I've seen both sides of the coin. It spooks me a little bit when I see her, because I'm like, okay, this is either going to be the hard win, or she's useless, and we just never have an ADC ever. So, yeah. Veigar. Veigar does not scare me in the least. Such a broken-ass champ. So easy to play. Has a lot of utility with his E. His R is literally a point-and-click nuke. I mean, what else can you really say? He's just so easy to play. Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz is strong. I don't think he's that hard to play. A lot of people think he's hard, but I don't think it's like that difficult. You just kind of have to sit back and throw your skill shots out. I think Vel'Koz is just a bit spooky. Only because I say it's kind of like slightly harder at Veigar, I guess. Now, I'm going to put him in not spooky. I've never seen Vel'Koz do nothing. They're always doing some damage. Vex is interesting. Vex is spooky to me. I like Vex. Vex is kind of Galio-esque. But Vex kind of has the Lee syndrome a little bit. Sometimes you are someone and you're like, holy shit, I just got this crazy blind R, and they just go in, and then like that can be a huge int. So sometimes Vex hyper ints, but most Vexes are reasonably useful. The reason I'll put her in spooky is just because I know she kind of has that potential to Lee syndrome. And if I see her on my team, I'm like, okay, I hope you're the good kind of Vex. Viego. So most Viegos that I play with are pretty good. Most Viegos tend to do something. I'm going to put Viego in a bit spooky. He's very snowbally. I don't like snowbally champions in terms of ones that are hard to snowball with. I think Viego is good. I think he's not too crazy hard to play. He has that Silas factor where you have to kind of know other champions' kits. Even more than Silas, honestly, because Silas is just their R. But for Viego, you have to actually know their entire kits to really be good at the champ. So it requires mastery, but most Viegos that I see actually are pretty good. Victor. Victor's interesting. Victor always has potential to do damage. Most Victors that I've played with tend to get there. I think most Victors that I play with tend to get to a point where they're relevant and useful. But they have the potential, kind of like the Vayne, to get snowballed on. And that scares me. I also know that if I have Victor on my team, we're less likely to contest things early. And although NA is certainly a mid-late game server, sometimes it becomes irrecoverable, and some Victors kind of mentally give up if they're behind when they can scale. So it just depends. Vi, I see Vi, and I'm like, bro, this is such a free win. Vi is kind of slept on, man. She's strong. She has a lot of damage. Ton of CC, ton of utility, and also with Galio, it's like disgusting, man. Imagine you're playing like Victor, just to use him as an example. You're laning against Galio, and the jungle is Vi. It's like, oh my god, I can't get hit by a single E or W from Galio, because if Vi's in the corner, I'm going to be CC'd for 8 seconds. And also, Vi's really good for R'ing in, and then I can R her. So I love Vi's teammate. I feel like she's always does something. She's really easy to play. Vladimir. Vlad is really strong. I think Vlad is hard to punish because he has fucking Zanya's as an ability, but you can move. So he's hard to punish. I'm going to put Vlad in not scary. I think he's sort of hard to play in team fights because you're not a long-range mage. You have to get into action, but he's hard to punish. I think most Vlads I've had on my team tend to do at least some damage. They might die a few times, but they always do a lot of damage. Volibear. It's interesting. Volibear is not a hard champ to play. He has great R plus Galio R synergy, so I like that. Most Volibears I've had do something. They're usually not useless, but I have had Volies that like kind of just give up and like troll, but I think most Volibears are just like a little spooky. Warwick scares me. The reason Warwick scares me on my team is I don't like Warwick as a champ. He's really strong early. He's a goddamn menace early. When he hits 6, he's just running around being an absolute monster. Okay, let me put it this way. Warwick jungle scares me on my team because I feel like Warwick falls off too hard and it's harder late game to contest things with him. But Warwick top, I like to see Warwick top. He cheeses most of the annoying champs like Fiora, Irelia stuff. He can like cheese them with barrier. So I like to. Okay, so I wish I could have 2 icons. If it's a Warwick top on my team, I like having them. If it's a Warwick jungle on my team, it's a little spooky, just a little bit. All right, so Wukong. Most Wukong's I've had do pretty damn well. He's a strong ass champ. He's got good synergy with Galio. I like having Wukong's. I haven't seen a Wukong feed in a long time. I think Wukong is a nice team to have. Xayah. I think most Xayahs that I've had honestly kind of scare me a lot. I don't think she's like the hardest champ to play. But I do feel like only one tricks play her, so I know that if someone locks in Xayah, I'm like, okay, this person Xayah's most of the time. But I just sort of feel like they're never quite there compared to other champs. And I've had some bad experiences with Xayah in the past. So my personal bias, extremely shook. I don't think she's a bad champ. I just, for whatever reason, tend to lose games with Xayah on my team. Xerath. Kind of the same deal, honestly. I feel like it's weird. I see Xerath on my team, and I'm like, this guy is doing like damage, but we just tend to lose with him. And I think it's partly the support enchant, like the support part of him. Xerath support not bad in lane, very strong in lane, but he's gonna get in a way outscaled by like Seraphine Sona, because Enchantress is just so disgustingly useful. And Xerath, they have to have their brain on the whole time because Xerath is all skill shots and positioning. So if you're not doing that, like if you ever autopilot on Xerath, it's gonna be a lot harder. So most Xerath, I see Xerath and I'm like, okay, this is very coin flippy. Xin Zhao, probably butchered that. It's probably Xin Zhao or something. Anyway, I think it's Xin Zhao. My friend Crazy can't solve that. Anyway, Xin Zhao. It's interesting. I don't see a lot of Shin, so it's hard to really for me to actually like fairly rate him. I guess by that principle, I'm gonna put him in spooky because he's kind of the unknown. I don't really know how good like Shin players are in the Plat community. So I guess it's like the unknown element. That's kind of a throwaway. I'll be honest. I don't really know. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Oh, Yasuo's. Everyone knows the League community meme of your Yasuo, their Yasuo is like a monster. It's true, man. It's fucking true. It's like every Yasuo I've ever had is just so bad. I have unironically seen Yasuo's in ranked. I'm playing Galio mid, and they're like, you know what's a good idea? Yasuo support. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, dude. Like, is it just because I have a knockup or something for you? Like, please, bro. Yas support, it's like I literally will dodge the game. Yas mid, they just tend to lose. I don't know what it is, but like most of the time I see Yas on my team, they just don't do anything. Okay, the most egregious is Yasuo fucking top. Yasuo top, I swear to God, is like the Riven, right? Yasuo mid is like here, like you know, in dodge. Yasuo top is like a Riven thing. Yasuo loses to so many champs. He's like, you have to outplay them out of your mind to win on Yasuo top. But people still lock him in because they think... Okay, so Yone. Sorry, I would go on like a 10-minute tangent. Yone. Yone is easier than Yasuo. I've seen more Yones do good things on my team than I have seen... I literally have never seen a Yasuo pop off. I swear to God. But Yone, I have seen them do that. So this is interesting. If it's Yone top, I'm going to put them in extremely shook. But if it's Yone mid... It's more like bit spooky. I think Yone mid is not that hard to play. I think you have a lot of winning matchups in mid. I think he does stuff. So it's interesting as where I'm going to rate him. Because I guess since he's extremely shook for top for me and bit spooky for mid, I'll put him in spooky. Yorick. Yorick is also interesting. I feel like Yorick is rarely completely useless because his split push is really good. Like absolutely, it is. But Yorick also can lose lane pretty hard. He gets outscaled by things like Irelia really hard. He can get bodied by like Darius in lane. He is good synergy with Galio. Like, he can definitely set things up. I'll put Yorick in Spooky. It's interesting. You have to prepare for the fact that he probably won't team fight in most games, so you're going to have to prepare for the fact that it's going to be a 45 pretty much the whole game, or 44 rather if he draws enough pressure, I suppose. Yorick is interesting. He can sometimes be an absolute godsend teammate, sometimes terrible. Yuumi. I mean, when do people complain about having Yuumi on their team? It's like, bro, unless they're just AFK Yuumi and they're literally doing nothing, if the Yuumi player is actually like using their brain cells, she's broken. But Yuumi gets banned half the time. Okay, Zach. Oh, Zach. Zach is like my demon for the enemy team. If I see Zach, I'm like, I want to dodge, please. But Zach on my team is really nice to have. I mean, he's really strong. Great engage. Amazing synergy with Galio. So I love it's like, I mean, it makes sense, right? He's my demon. Like, amazing to have on your side, terrifying to have on the other side. Zach's so slept on. Zed. This is kind of the Yasuo thing, right? It's like our Zed, their Zed is like Mr. Olympia. Our Zed is like in a wheelchair or something. I don't know, man. Like, I've seen Zeds do stuff, but it's not like they're always useless. I mean, Zed is like, I don't know. People say he's hard to play. I think that's kind of true. I think he has a really high skill ceiling. But I think Zed skill floor isn't too crazy. I mean, he has insane damage, and he's really hard to punish. If you're not great at the game. I think Zed is going to go in Spooky. Sometimes they go 0-9 and they're just terrible, kind of like the R Yasuo, R Zed meme. But Zed is a lot, in my opinion, has a lower skill floor than Yasuo and is more useful, so we'll put him in Spooky. Zeri. Most Zeris are reasonably useful. I'm not scared when I see Zeri. I'll put her in not scary. Ziggs. I am scared of my Ziggs, though. Ziggs, I feel like, is interesting. You have to play on the fact that he's all poke. Ziggs is not like out there really kiting people. He has good damage, like, don't get me wrong. But he's like, he's very unique. And I think that sometimes in bot lane, like bot Ziggs, sometimes this kind of gets slammed. So it depends. I don't like to see Ziggs on my team. I don't know what it is, but it just kind of makes me think like, it's not the best. Zillion. I like to see Zillion on my team. Very strong. His R is always useful. He's always useful. Zoe. Zoe scares me. Now the thing is, Zoe is really rare, so I haven't seen a whole lot of them. And a lot of Zoe players are one-trick Zoe players, and she's really good. If it's a good Zoe, she's an insanely strong champ, but she's hard to play. Her skill shots are hard to land. If I see like a Zoe and it's like enemy Zed, I'm terrified, man. I'm terrified because I'm like, the Zoe's gonna get shit on. Last but not least, we have Zyra. Zyra does not scare me. Zyra is really strong. A lot of AoE damage. I don't think she's that hard to play. She lane bullies pretty hard. Most Zyras I've had on my team are really good. So yeah. Alright guys, so that wraps up this tier list. Once again, this is from my perspective as a Galio mid main on the NA server as a plat player. So this is just my experience. This is what I think is scary or not scary. Let me know what you think differently. What would you change about my tier list? If you comment, please drop your elo, drop what scares you about the champ or what doesn't scare you, whatever. Leave whatever comments you want to do. It helps the algorithm, helps me out a ton. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, peace.